Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I know that this is the day that is reserved for a market update where we go through the charts, and we'll still have a market update, but this time it's going to be quite a bit different. I'm still going to have all the usual charts posted on my website, and I'll leave the link down below in the description bar. But today, due to all the chatter on social media about how the market is now turning, we are going to focus on what is happening with those rates, and we will focus on the spot market in particular. So let's go ahead and start digging. Ready? Let's go. So this week has been marked with a lot of chatter on social media about how, oh my God, the rates are increasing like crazy, and brokers are starting to even give back loads to the shipper because they cannot cover them, they cannot find capacity, and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to move here because FreightWaves actually released an article talking about how they have found sudden shift in the spot market, and they showed this map stating, and I quote this, "The map has turned extremely blue, indicating that spot rates are suddenly surging well beyond recent trends. It's happening all over the country, and it's happening overnight." The interesting thing about this is that this is happening without any change in volumes or rejection rates. Volumes are still low beyond belief, and rejection rates are still at about 5.6%, which is nothing crazy. It was such a drastic change that the FreightWaves team had to actually double check their data to make sure that everything is correct, and they found no errors. They found that yep, volumes are still crap, rejections are still low, yet spot market rates are increasing. So why would that happen? According to this article, the administration's recent immigration enforcement efforts are starting to have a significant psychological and behavioral impact on immigrant truck drivers and carriers that hire truck drivers with questionable immigration status. Now, Craig Fuller also quoted an immigration attorney in the Serbian Times who stated that he is advising all his clients to stay off trucks, even if they have an unexpired employment authorization document. Now, I'm going to add to this, and I'm going to show you some of the screenshots here. First of all, one thing that I know for a fact is that CDLs are getting downgraded left and right, but it's not happening the way you might think. For example, one of the ways that these CDLs are getting downgraded is through medical cards. In California, for example, those who hold a non-domiciled CDL and their medical card is expiring, so they go get a new medical card, they can no longer upload, or the medical examiner can no longer upload that medical card into the DMV system, because even though the upload is complete, shortly after, the California DMV sends this letter. Now, in case it's hard to see, this is what it says. "Thank you for your application for the medical examiner report. Based on our records, your medical examiner's report cannot be updated through the virtual field office at this time." Now, here's another example, and it says, "Your application cannot be processed through the virtual office and has been closed. Your case was closed as the transaction request is not something that can currently be processed through the DMV virtual office." Now, what does that mean? Well, if you have a medical card that ends up expiring and no new medical card is sent to the DMV, your CDL gets automatically downgraded. And with this new rule, non-domiciled CDL holders who do not fit into one of those three visa categories no longer can renew their CDL. All right, that's a little bit about capacity. Now let's talk about the charts for the market update. Again, all charts that I usually show are going to be available on my website, but today we're just going to focus on the spot market rates and compare last week to this week. So let's start with reefers. Last week versus this week. As you can see, 3 out of the 5 regions actually saw a decrease in posted rates, but the Northeast saw sizable increases, as did the West Coast. But volumes decreased in 4 of the 5 regions. What about dry vans? For dry vans, 2 out of the 5 regions saw average rate per mile increases, but volume decreased everywhere. Flatbeds, only the Midwest saw average increase in the rate per mile, although the volume increased there as well, which could be the driving force. Now, again, you can look at the rate per mile maps in more detail on my website, but for now, I'm going to say that this data doesn't suggest any crazy surge in spot market rates. But there is a limitation to this data. The way I get those average rate per miles is by looking at the posted rates and averaging them out in each region. Now, we all know that many brokers do not post their rates, so a lot of loads that are available are not shown here simply because the rate wasn't posted. The second thing is that these rates show nothing about negotiations. Is it easier to negotiate now, or is it more of the same? But I can talk from my experience operating open deck trailers. Unfortunately, I did not see much of a difference on the load board. Now, I was reading all these posts about how spot market rates are surging, yet it didn't fully match the experience that I was having. And we were in pretty, decent areas. Were negotiations easier? Yeah, they were a little bit easier, especially towards the middle and end of the week, but nothing jaw-dropping. Were brokers extra nice this week? Yes, that's where I can say it was jaw-dropping, because pretty much all brokers were super nice and they were very apologetic for any inconvenience that came up. Did I book loads faster, which is one of the ways I gauge the market? Did I book loads faster? No, I still had to sit and wait for that one load, unlike any other, to come out so I could grab it. And another metric, did I get more calls from brokers? Yes and no. If I were to post a truck, for example, this week, I barely got any phone calls, but I did get a lot of phone calls of brokers we have worked with before for loads picking up in other areas, especially the South. I'm going to tell you this. Indiana, for example, was an absolute nightmare towards the end of the week because loads were very limited on the load board and they were being booked within 3 minutes of being posted. Now, as far as I understand, it is dry vans and reefers that are experiencing the biggest change in the market, specifically in the Midwest. Unfortunately, I do not have firsthand visibility into dry vans or reefers or what is going on with them. I can see the data, I can see the rates, but I cannot get a feeling for it simply because I do not operate dry vans or reefers anymore. So, question for you guys, everyone, regardless of what kind of trailer you pull or what kind of equipment you operate. What are you seeing in the market this week? Do you see any improvement, or is it more of the same? Are negotiations easier? Perhaps you're seeing improvement in certain markets, but decreases or more of the same in other markets. I'd be very curious to hear what your experiences are, because if you look at social media, it almost seems like the market is booming, and that's not quite what I'm experiencing. Yes, there are certain areas, if you look at the granular data, not just averages for the Midwest, for the South, if you look at the granular data, yes, there are definitely some big improvements in certain markets. If I remember correctly, Pennsylvania for dry vans had a huge increase in the average rate per mile. There were certain areas for all three equipment types that definitely had a sizable increase in the average rate per mile. But if we look at the big picture, I don't quite see it yet. Now, that doesn't mean it's not happening. Perhaps I'm not seeing it yet. So that's why I'd be very curious to hear about your opinions on the market this week. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Friday. Happy Friday and weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.